Ashley, and you're very welcome to the Creative Souls of Clare podcast. You're joining me from what looks like your studio, somewhere in London, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited because this is my first podcast. So this is a nice little tick for me.
Oh, congratulations on entering the podcast realm.
Here, which is very like 2020, 21, isn't it? Yeah, I am in my studio. Welcome to my studio. My studio is in Earlsfield in southwest London. And I have a studio in this amazing block of creatives that includes recording studios downstairs, like U2 has been down there.
Oh, wow.
Really cool. And then there's like all sorts of creatives from, you know, recent graduates right up to artists who show in some of the major galleries in Mayfair. So it's a really, really great, it's a really great and supportive space to be in, and I find that so helpful being an artist, because let me tell you, I have had a lot of very dodgy studios since I graduated, so I'm very privileged to have a nice studio all to myself.
Well, firstly, I want to know a little bit more about this studio and the vibe in general, but tell me more about the dodgy studios. What's the worst studio you've ever had? Anything particularly?
So, well, I came to London particularly bad, yeah, really bad. I came to London in 2012, so what's that, nearly 10 years ago now, which is a bit mad. I did my undergrad in Galway, in the art school in Galway, which was amazing, and I said, right, I want to make sure I go on and do a master's in fine arts, so I was offered a place in Central St. Martin's, and that's how I ended up in London. So I did a 2-year master's, and when you're in art school, it's all lovely because everybody's on the same wavelength and everybody gets each other, and you know, it's full of creativity and big ideas and big boundaries been, you know, crossed. And then you come out of art school and you go, right, how do I make this happen? So the first thing I was trying to do was to get a studio and to fund a studio. So I was waitressing and nannying, and I happened to come by a free space that a friend of mine from Sligo, actually, who I'd studied with, her employer at a restaurant had an old kebab shop on the Holloway Road, and we had it for free, and we set it up as a little studio space for the two of us, and it was diabolical because it stank of oil and like old chicken, and it was really dusty, and all the, you know, the big ovens with the silver covering were just splattered with oil, and they were all pushed down to the side of the room. It was full of dust, but it was a starting point. And you know, London's a really exciting city, but it's a very expensive city, so like, yeah, just to have a space to actually go and make and create just felt good, even though it was really depressing and it was Baltic as well.
So you've definitely you know, served your time as that kind of quintessential impoverished, yeah, sort of struggle. But now, like this, I'm not saying that where you are is that you've entered any kind of lucrative zone or anything, but it sounds like you're a bit more set up. Well, you are a bit more a lot more established, yeah, and rightly so. Can you tell me just about, like, it strikes me that having like music studios and that kind of environment around you, it must be so dynamic. Like, is there a cafe and a shared space? Where do you bump into people there? And
yeah, so there's about, I don't know, there's about 40 like art studios on the like first, second, third floor.
Yeah.
And there's a shared like communal kitchen space. And really what happens is people, I've actually had to put a sign on my door doing an interview, because people will come along every morning just to come in for a chat and check in. And it's a lovely way to bounce ideas and to hear about what's going on in the art world, or, you know, to work out problems basically. Or yeah, so a good proportion of the day is spent chatting, but that's a really big part of it, because it's how you actually develop. And especially coming from an art school background, that was a very big part of it as well, where you would sit down and discuss the work and go through it and all the rest of it. The recording studios are in the like basement, like in the ground floor, so we never really see any of the musicians coming in or out. But I have I have a pipe that pumps, takes out the old air and pumps in the fresh air into my studio, and when they're downstairs recording, I can hear all the beats coming through the pipes. which is quite fun actually, because I'm thinking, who's down there today? What's going on?
Wow. So
Yeah.
if you two were there, then presumably there could be any amount of high-level, well-known bands. Like,
Yeah, I believe what's his name? The guy from the Gorillaz was there a couple of weeks ago. Is it David Albert?
Yeah, Damon. Come on. You know, he's a huge fan of this podcast, and he's going to be very disappointed that you don't remember his name.
He was down there, I think, in the summer, like, yeah, so a couple of months ago. I don't know, something.
Yeah.
Like the studio is in an industrial estate, so there's loads of little things going on. Like there's like a film studio kind of a bit farther down, so there's always sets or like photography shoots going on, or like all just it's, and then you have, you know, like a fishmongers, and you have a bakery, and really eclectic bunch.
That's class. It must be such a stimulating environment, because implicitly a lot of the work of an artist can be quite insular and lonely to an extent.
Really insular, yeah, which I'm very conscious of, because, you know, that's why I wanted to get a good studio space in London, because it's very important for me to have that support and that kind of network around me. And then the studios are really well run, and like we have regular, well, under normal circumstances they're not so much anymore, we'll have like, you know, pizza and wine night like in the reception area, or just beers or something like that. And then every year we do an open studio weekend, which is a really great event where all the studios are opened up, so like you can come and visit the makers in their space, learn about the work, speak directly to the person, and it's just a really great vibe. And we haven't had that since 2019, obviously because of COVID, so it's happening in November, which, so I'm gonna start prepping work for that now, because I've just finished like a whole new body of work. So yeah,
that's great. And so you mentioned a new body of work, can you tell me more about what's been the impulse and the driver, and what's the inspiration and so on?
So as an overall, I suppose, is just an overview, I'm really interested in the materiality of oil paint and how I can play with it and manipulate it and build it and structure it on a 2D surface. When I was studying, I was really interested in the abstract expressionist movement, which would have been like 1940s, 1950s, like de Kooning, Rothko, Pollock. And then say after that would have been, what's his name with the soup cans? Oh my God, Andy Warhol, forgot his name. So it's that period of art, let's say, it was really shocking, you know, because it was abstracted. It wasn't like, you know, painting a landscape where people could understand it. And a lot of those artists dealt with mark making, and how you can express through a mark, and how you can structure a mark. So that was sort of what my work is rooted in. And then I worked very much along that area for quite a while. And then in 2019, I won a residency in Kilrealig down in County Kerry, which is run by the wonderful Noelle Campbell Sharp, which is, she renovated a famine village into studios. And I did my proposal on the basis that I live in London and it's so busy and bustling, and I need some quiet downtime to sort of refocus my work. And it was absolutely what I needed, because when I went there, I didn't see anyone for like 3 days, and there was no Wi-Fi connection, and it was complete switch off. But I ended up making a lot of work into studies into my surroundings, into my environment, which of course is the Skelligs, and like all that sharded and splintered rock. And I never thought I'd be an artist who would make work from the landscape, because I never really had that appeal for it. But then I started to merge my interest in paint and its materiality with the structure of like these sharded rocks, and this whole new body of work came about. And I've been working from that since 2019 basically. And of course, like, I'm from County Clare, just on the edge of the Burn. I grew up in Lisdoonvarna, so like you have all those beautiful formations of rock and stone around there as well, which I'm only now starting to pay attention to, because it's come into my work so much. And the ethos around my work right now, or the concerns of it, is about finding lightness in the heaviness of stone wall formations, if that makes sense, and using those elements of stone wall and abstracting, always abstracting and abstracting with it. So it's very process heavy. Like I use a lot of different techniques and applications and layers of paint, but to get that nice structure amongst the chaos and the lightness of it is aim.
So you grew up surrounded by quite dramatic formations in a sense, and obviously life took you in lots of different directions, right into now an industrial estate in London, but then back to Kerry, and like obviously Kerry's quite different than North Clare, but there are some similarities, and I'm wondering, is there any sense that, you know, London kind of closed in your environment to an extent, and then being in Kerry has allowed you to see with new eyes, like London kind of changed your perception, and then being back in Ireland, then you can now start to re-see where you grew up with this new vantage point?
Well, I mean, luck, isn't that the essence of generally what happens to people when they move away from home?
Yeah, well, it is, yeah, classical.
Yeah, it's classic. I mean, when I first came here, I was, yeah, like I started looking at what is considered highbrow and lowbrow art. So like I was mixing graffiti with abstract expressionism, which, you know, would have been to historical movements that you didn't really mix. So that would have been the very urban, the very London influence, I guess, coming into me. And then when I was going back to Ireland and I got that residency, yes, I wanted my work to become more somber, to become more quiet, to like I completely changed my palette, I completely changed the approach. And it was all because I settled back into that very quiet in a famine village environment, and was able to just condense everything, refocus, and think about how I wanted to move forward. So I needed that time to do it. And definitely you are always influenced by your environment and your circumstance. So it's really good to change it. But I had left home much prior to that, because I was a dancer with Riverdance. So like I first left home when I was 16, and I was on tour for nearly 10 years. So like I have that appreciation of Ireland and where I come from quite a young age, because I've seen a lot and done a lot. Like, and Ireland to me is such a unique place. Like I have a lot of graw for it, for sure.
So I'm inclined to ask you what might be a tricky question, and you may not thank me for it, I'm not sure, but if you have that graw for Ireland, why are you not living in Ireland?
Yeah, I know. Well, the reason I ended up coming to London was to do my master's, because at the time I couldn't do a practice-based master's in Ireland. It just wasn't available. So I had to go outside of Ireland. I was offered master's at the Art Institute in Chicago and the New York Studio School, and I got down to the final four for the Fulbright Fund, which I think you're familiar with as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
Didn't get it in the end, so I couldn't go to America. So I said, right, why don't I try London? So that's how I ended up being in London. And then when I graduated, I kind of thought, oh, I've survived as a student. Will I just give it a go and see what happens? So 10 years later, I'm still here. I love Ireland, but, and I don't like to say this, but I just don't have the same opportunities that I have here.
Yeah.
But under typical circumstance, my mom is an artist. So I am able, under normal circumstances, pre-COVID, to go back and work in her studio in Clare and share it with her, and then come back to London as well. So I have a very sweet spot between two environments that I can utilize. But never say never. I mean, my husband is from Ireland as well. We met here, and you never know if we might go back, we might not. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I can certainly, you know, appreciate that idea of the opportunities. And the reality is that Ireland is a relatively small country, and by virtue of scale for the arts, sometimes being abroad, you know, London is double the population of Ireland essentially.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, who knows, as you say, and never say never. But let's go back to when you were 16. I'm just wondering, did you finish school at that point, or what was going on?
So I was in transition year. So I spent transition year basically on tour with Riverdance, and then my parents made me come back to do my Leaving Cert, which now in hindsight, thank God they did, but at the time obviously I was kicking and screaming. So I took the year off, and then I came back to my Leaving Cert, and then straight after my Leaving Cert I went out on tour again. And Riverdance, I mean, not only like from a dancing point of view, I couldn't believe that I had this opportunity to travel the world and someone was going to pay me to do it as well. But also I always knew that I wanted to go into Riverdance, and then I wanted to go to art school. So I was able to combine this opportunity as sort of like the basis for my education in art. So like I always made a point of all the cities we went to, I would go and see the major museums or the art collections and the galleries. So like I gave myself that foundational education through being on tour with Riverdance. So it was sort of a double whammy in a way.
That's an amazing level of awareness and intentionality for a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, you know, because so many, and I'm sure you've seen it, you know, so many young people, particularly young Irish people, maybe I'm projecting here myself, but get lost in a sea of alcohol mist between the ages of 15, 16, 17 and say 30. Yeah. And then they sober up in some form and find their way around. But to have that sense of drive and purpose, maybe it was the structure and the rigor of the dance, and being a professional, essentially, you're an elite professional. There's no time for that messing around at that. I know, I'm not saying you didn't have the crack, I'm sure you did, but
no, like 100%. But I mean, like I had been dancing from like the age of 4, I think, and I owe a hell of a lot to Irish dancing and the discipline and the self-application, because I mean, now I'm working for myself and running my own business, and like nobody else is going to do that. Like I have to have the discipline to put myself forward, to put myself fully engaged with it, you know? Yeah. So I have a lot to thank Irish dancing for and Riverdance. And before all that, I have a lot to thank my parents for, because they took us to the fetches and the classes and all the rest of it. And I think when I was in school, I was just very determined. I mean, I really liked school, but I used to get quite frustrated in, I don't know, like biology or something. I knew I would never have to use the anatomy of the earthworm, you know, in my future career.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I knew what I wanted to do, like, and at the time Riverdance, you know, it was very new and very fresh, and I just thought it was the most amazing thing. And because my mum was an artist, I always knew I wanted to go to art school. So I was like, okay, I'll obviously only be able to dance for so long because my physical body won't be able to do it. So then I can go to art school. And I'm very lucky that it turned out the way it did, because it doesn't always work out like that. And even when I went to art school, I was still dancing. So I was going back to do tours at Christmas time or at summertime when I'd be off uni, or doing little weekends away and stuff. So in essence, like Riverdance paid for my education as well, which is brilliant. And even when I moved over here, I was still working with them, and I have a great relationship with them still. So yeah, I've been, I'm truly appreciative of it, but I've worked very hard and I have been very focused. And I think because I cross-pollinated from one art form into another, you kind of bring what you know, but you have to kind of separate yourself from it as well in a way. And what I mean by that is, like when I went to art school, I thought it was really cliche if I did work around the body or the figure, because I had been a dancer. So I sort of really went against that, and that's how we ended up becoming more interested in abstraction and that sort of area. But now, like I did an interview recently with this guy who's doing not podcasts, blogs for London Irish, and there's people in London of Irish descent who are doing different things. Sorry, I'm digressing a bit, but anyways, he was asking me, like, does the dancing feed into your art? Like, and 100% it does, because you can't help but be influenced by what you've done. And there's a sort of a musicality or a rhythm to my work. There's a lightness to it. And I think that will always be there. And I owe that to my dancing background. And I can embrace that now. I think when I first started out, I felt a little like, I had a lecturer who had said to me, Aisling, you're either dancer or artist, which is it? Like, and I was like, why can't I be both, you know? So it took me a while to find my identity around two areas, you know?
Yeah, that lecturer who stated that, you know, to a relatively young student, and presumably then to more even younger students in the future, it sounds like they said it with such surety, you know, and yet they're wrong, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I can, you know, fully see that now, but I don't know, I guess it's a growing pain as well, isn't it? Like, because you're finding your feet, and you don't want to be defined by something you did before. But like in my case, because Riverdance was so big and it was so international and recognizable, like that was sort of something that I was recognized for, but like I wanted my art to move past that, and my painting. So like
yeah. No, I can appreciate like the separation, and there doesn't probably need to be a separation.
Yeah.
But now I'm kind of sensing just that sense of integration as well, where it's all the one, but yet entirely separate.
Yeah. It's a funny little world, and
yeah,
the older I get, and the more established I become as an artist, like the more I can, you know, that was then, it was brilliant, and I've got everything I needed out of it, and it's given me loads, but this is now, and this is happening, that's happening, and you know, this is why I'm in London, because I have these opportunities happening. So yeah,
I'm sensing that the full integration might land when you find yourself dancing in your studio as you paint. Has that ever happened?
oh yeah, it has happened. It happened.
Sober.
Sober. Well, yeah, because yeah, no, I did do a couple of years ago. I sort of played around with like foot marks, you know.
Oh yeah.
Foot, it was my dancing shoes. I put paint on the sole of my shoes. It was when I was in uni, just to see what kind of, because
I like it. Yeah.
And I wanted to see what would happen, and I was kind of referencing it around Franz Klein's work. So he made a lot of work around, he would put paint on a naked body and then push them against a canvas just to see what mark they made. It was figurative work, but very abstracted, because it was these little blobs. So I was kind of referencing that and seeing how it would develop. But yeah, it just didn't take off for me.
Yeah.
I just kind of, you know, you experiment with things, and I think you have to experiment with creativity in order to move forward. So you do all these little things as you go along, and you find your path.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, that seems to be part of the creative life, is the realm of experimentation and constantly seeking out new pathways and following ideas that maybe don't work out then as well.
Yeah. You always learn, and there's a certain element of failure that goes along with all that. And I think embracing the failure and learning how to learn from it, basically. Like, I totally embrace failure now. I think it's a great thing to do, because I've always learned from it.
So, you know, is it a misnomer essentially? It depends on your view of failure, but if you view it as in that sense, and they talk about this a lot in business and entrepreneurism, that, you know, ultimately most successful entrepreneurs have failed at some level, and that was essential to their current success. So therefore the failures weren't failures at all. And like, it's just I mean, is it a false pressure that society puts on people that it has to succeed at all costs and so on, rather than saying, no, you will fail, or rather just rename the failure as a learning juncture or something?
Or a happy accident. I think 100%. Like, I think when I was younger, I found it really hard to not get stuff right or to fail at something. And I think that came from my dancing background, really, because it was so competitive. You didn't perform right, or you didn't compete right, then you would fail, because you wouldn't get the place that you wanted, or the results, or whatever.
Yes, which is very real then. It is a real,
very real.
Yeah.
A lot, as like, although it teaches you a lot, it's a lot to kind of handle as a child. And I think there was certain periods in my life where I felt like, I have to be the best, I have to win it. Not that I was that competitive, I have to win everything, but I sort of felt like I have to get ahead, and I have to this, I have to that, like, rather than going, let's just test the waters and see what happens. And I'm a lot more able to do that now. But because my background was like, practice every day and then you will win and then you'll get ahead and you'll get the right results and all the rest of it. But like, it just doesn't always happen like that, because not everybody can be a winner. Like, not everybody can win every competition. And really, I know it's so cliche now, but it is so in the journey, not the destination. Like, because the discipline that I learned through practicing and through competing, again, I'm going to repeat myself, has completely played into what I do now, like completely.
Yeah.
That was the win in the failure, let's say.
So your parents were clearly very influential and instrumental in all of this. And you mentioned your mother bringing you to feshes and classes, and like, is music and dance in your parents? Well, obviously art and painting is in your mother's work very much, but is music and dance, was that always part of the family, and were they dancers and singers or musicians?
Yeah. So I mean, overall, I think I had a really creative upbringing, because my parents owned a hotel, and there was a bar and a restaurant in it, and we would have international visitors. So I was always sort of meeting people from different parts of the world, which was brilliant. And then both of my parents were set dancers, massively into music. My dad loves like the Kilfenora Cayley Band and Nat King Cole, and my mom is more into like the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan, and she loves like classical, like Debussy and that kind of area. So that kind of would have been the background music, let's say, of my childhood. And then as well in the bar, of course, being from County Clare, there was always live sessions in the bar. And always dancing. And I have two older sisters, and they also danced. So we were always sort of trotted down to the bar to entertain all the guests, and we would go in and dance. Or, you know, massive argument before we go in about who walks in first and who starts dancing first, and all the usual, you know, stuff that goes on with siblings. But it gave me a real, it was sort of my introduction to, well, first of all, performing and understanding that, and second of all, to other cultures that, you know, came into Ireland, especially where I'm from, where you're based now, I suppose I should say. And yeah, like, it was a really creative upbringing. And I think growing up somewhere like Clare just gives you so much freedom as well, because it's sort of such a rural area, but there's so much going on at the same time. So there's a lot to take from that. And again, as you know, when I was touring the world, or like now living in a major, very busy city, like I miss that. And that's why, you know, kind of embracing that when I do go home is really important. Like,
yeah. Did you ever have like any periods of like massive doubt, or, you know, crossroads of where you thought, I just, whether it be dancing or painting, that you felt, oh Christ, you know, maybe it's time for another change, and maybe I should go and get the proverbial normal job as such?
Yeah, 100% I did, because that's life, isn't it? Life is when you question yourself and you question what you're doing. And certainly when I was still full-time with Riverdance, we had a residency in Boston for a couple of weeks. And I just started to feel this real need to start going. I wanted to go into education, and I wanted to go into art school, but Riverdance was such a lovely, safe, exciting bubble. And, you know, you didn't really have a whole lot of responsibility, and it, you know, it was all very exciting. It was quite glamorous. And, you know, I could have stayed there for years, but if I had stayed there for years, I probably would have ended up resenting it. So I was kind of at a bit of a crossroads as to when I should leave and when I should start in art school. And luckily my undergrad was in Galway, and they had allowed me to defer every year, so I didn't actually lose my place. You know, every year writing a letter in January, hello, I'm still in Riverdance, can you please keep my place for the following year? So thank you to GMIT. But what happened for me at that point was I was going into the venue, we were doing a matinee, and I picked up the New York Times. There was, you know, the way sometimes you get the paper outside your hotel room. So like I picked that up and I brought it in with me into the matinee to just flick through while I was doing my hair and makeup. And there was a section in the arts, in the cultural section, about a ballerina, and the the title was Leave the Stage Before the Stage Leaves You, and something just really resonated with me, and I just thought I want to leave Riverdance still loving it and totally remembering all the great stuff about it, like, and I don't want to stay here just for the sake of staying here, for the lifestyle, for the money, for anything like that. Like, I want to go now, but I'm here with it and I love it, and I'm going to go on to the next thing and I have like a positive memory and a good feeling from it. And then I think in terms of having crossroads with art, yeah, because it's not easy, you know. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. Certainly I've definitely had times when I've gone, God, this is really hard, but I always knew this is what I wanted to do. So when I did come against those crossroads, it was kind of just getting past the initial frustration and then laying out the cards and go, right, how can I make this a bit easier? Like, you know, even like when I had that really crap studio, like, how am I going to make this work in London? Look at this studio, I'm freezing. I can't actually paint because there's so much dust around me and it's so cold. What can I do to make it better? Okay, I can do A, I can do B and C. And then you find your way out of it. And I think the more that you actually have to pick the road at a crossroads, the more, again, you learn from that, like, and, you know, the more you progress. And I think the more you put in, the more you sacrifice for what you do and how you want to do it, the more ingrained you are in it and the more push you have to continue in it, you know. Because I've definitely had times where I'm like, oh God, this is so hard, but then I'm like, I've given up so much to do this, I've come this far, I can't go back on myself now because I would be letting myself down. So yeah, definitely I've had tough times with it.
Yeah, that's very interesting, that idea that I've come so far, you know, to not go back. And yeah,
because I think I would disappoint myself, and then that's kind of the worst thing for me, like, that if I let myself down, because you've invested so much already, and like other people have invested in me as well. Like, I've received funding from like the Arts Council, even from Clare County Council when I started out, or like last year I won a bursary award from the Women's Irish Network, which are a UK based charity, like amazing platform. And the more that people see potential in you and want you to do well, you feel like, oh no, I have, you know, so it just spurs you on. But when you have those moments of doubt, like, you kind of feel almost guilt, you know, because you've these other people sort of, supporting you. So yeah, I don't know.
So what I heard that you sorry, I was going to ask you about there was something about I read online or saw somewhere about Gordon Ramsay. Is there something going on there with?
Yeah, so I've just finished a project where Gordon Ramsay has selected 2 large paintings for his new restaurant in the Savoy Hotel in very swanky part of London. So that's really exciting. And I think, you know, that's another indication of being in London and having these opportunities, because people can come down to my studio and view the work in the flesh. I'm not that far from central London, for example, where this new restaurant is going in. And as well, like, that job came about through having more of a social media presence, because they found me on my Instagram.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So like pre-COVID, COVID has kind of had a positive effect for me. I'm really happy to say, because there's been so much tragedy from it. Like, I would have had my website and I would have had my Instagram and a few other social media channels, but like I wasn't actually interacting with them. I was almost scared of my website because I didn't know how to use it. I was afraid it would just all break if I tried to go into the back end of it. And my Instagram was just there purely because, you know, I had seen other people using it and I thought, oh, I should probably be there, but I wasn't properly engaging and utilizing them. And then when COVID hit, and, you know, like everybody else, I lost all the coming work that was supposed to happen for the following year of 2020. I just thought, okay, what can I do? Like, and it was a time where proactivity had to come into play, and you have to think, right, self-resilience, let's go for it. So I started becoming a lot more active in the online space, and putting myself out there more, like not just my paintings, but actually doing this kind of thing, talking about my work and about the studio and how I do stuff. And then I started to get more engagement, and I've met people from all across the world. I've sent my first painting to Australia recently. That was purely an Instagram thing as well. I've sold work through my website. I've learned how to manage my website. It's a work in progress because I'm not a techie person. It takes me a while. But like, sort of, I think pre-COVID, moving into the online space, I was really uncomfortable with it, because my education in art school, it's always, you know, the gallery, like it's not you putting yourself out there as such. And I think COVID has really turned the engine on that, like, and has really pushed things forward. So it's a completely different landscape now, and you have the tools to put yourself out there. And, you know, something like the Gordon Ramsay job came from that. And I've had quite a couple of other jobs come from that as well. Like, so it's been great, yeah.
So when you say like the job came from that, and maybe this is my own ignorance of social media, you know, are these people, are you showing up on hashtags, or where on earth, how are they finding you?
Yeah, I don't know. This is the holy grail, isn't it, on Instagram?
Yeah. How does Gordon Ramsay find an artist painting on? Yeah.
I mean, it's I think it's your activity on it, like how much you use it. Now, look, I don't have a massive following on Instagram, but like I know the people who do follow me are very engaged with what I do, because like, for example, every Wednesday evening, today's Wednesday, so like this evening, I will be speaking live from my studio, and everyone who follows me can come into my life in my studio. And the reason I started this through COVID again was because there's always been an interest in what it's like to be an artist, and how does that work, and how do you make
yeah.
that kind of thing. So that's why I started doing those Wednesday evening updates. And it was an art consultant who saw me doing that, who put my work in front of Gordon Ramsay, and then that's how the trickle, let's say, started.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah,
because you don't know who's seeing anything and who they know and how it all links up. But I suppose the common thread here is putting yourself out there, and that can be difficult, you know, particularly for people that maybe are more introverted or prefer the kind of privacy of not being out there as well.
oh, 100%. Like, and people always say to me, oh, you're able to do that because you're a dancer, like. And I'm like, no. Like, it took me ages to get comfortable. Like, you know, even now we're filming this like live in my studio. Like, you know, 2 years ago I would have been really uncomfortable doing this, but because I've sort of just made myself do it. And I think because you have to do it within your own capacity, like what you're comfortable with. And I think you have to be authentic about what you're doing. Like, there would be, I don't know, there would be no point in me doing it unless I was being very genuine about what I was doing. And you know, for the stuff that to me is really sort of boring, not boring, but like that is just day to day, like, I don't know, squeezing paint out onto my paint palette, you know, other people would be like, oh wow, is that how you start mixing colors, or what is that paint palette like, or, you know, ask me different questions. So it's sort of like, I always think, you know, if I was a chef, that I would want to show people what I'm eating, because I guess you would be interested to see what a chef eats. So I try to think of it that way. But it definitely takes time. And I'm not somebody who's really extroverted or anything like that, but I just sort of said, right, this is my own space. It's a very personal space as well. Even opening up your studio or like painting live is a really difficult thing to do, because you realize people are actually watching you. But, you know, I'm quite confident with how I make and how I create. So I'm more comfortable doing it now. And I think because I've done it, within my own boundaries, it's okay. Definitely, it takes a while to figure it out, definitely. But it is the age that we're living in. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Like, and we're moving more and more into the digital space. So I feel like you kind of, if you want to be an artist and make work, and, you know, just keep it for you, that's totally fine. But I sell my work, so I have to put myself out there, like, and I have to have a presence, and people have to be able to get in touch with me or relate to me or see how I make a painting, because it makes it it's sort of like more experiential for them then, because they're able to talk about it more, especially with abstraction, that they understand how, I don't know, that mark was made or that color was mixed. They're able to chat about it, and you know.
Yeah, you're also seizing the kind of means of production a little bit more, in that whilst we can bemoan social media and there are a lot of negative aspects to it, it does allow you to connect directly with customers or art lovers. And whereas before, the gallery kind of controlled a lot of the space, and that wasn't always just or fair or ideal. Like, I don't know what percentages, but I know that galleries can take a hell of a lot of,
they do,
the majority of the fee.
Yeah, they can take up to 50% in normal circumstances.
50 is about normal, is it?
Yeah, it's about normal. But I mean, look, I would say there is room for everybody, 100%.
Yeah.
But I suppose I'm at the stage where I don't want to be relying on somebody else. Now, I still do work with galleries, and I still do work with art consultants who will take my work into art fairs or different things like that. But I like the interaction of getting to know my buyers. I like the conversation and just the beginning of that stage, and then taking someone through it. Or for example, if somebody wants like a commission, you know, like someone's coming to view these paintings later on today, like for their home. So like I can talk them through that. What kind of space is it? What is it like? What are you thinking? All that sort of thing. And because if they've been following me for most people will follow me for 1.5 to 2 years before they actually buy anything, because they want to get the full understanding. And I feel like I can offer that more intimately than, say, a gallery could. That's the difference. There is room for all of us, but it's just a different experience, and it's a different, it's more intimate. And like I've developed relationships with some of my buyers, like, because a lot of people will come down to my studio to buy direct. They'll just come down and see what I have and what's available, you know, and we can do it that way. So and I enjoy that aspect. I enjoy getting to know people. So again, like open studios that I mentioned earlier, that we're having it in November, like if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, that sounds like such a cool thing, just Google open studios near me. Like, they happen everywhere. If you're in Ireland or England or America, wherever, like, it's just finding out about them. And it's a great way to learn. If you're not sure about what you want or where you might want to put work, it's a great way to just start thinking about it. And a lot of people will come back. I have second and third time buyers because they know so much about my work now, because I've been putting it out there through social media and through my website and so forth. And they just feel more invested in it themselves in a way, which is lovely, because I have the relationship with them.
Yeah, it makes it a bit more kind of holistic, in a sense that it's they're kind of part of the experience of the art as well, and that I mean, you could apply the same to, I'm just thinking of the food movement or food culture. You know, typically most people buy their food off a supermarket shelf. They barely even speak to the person at the till. But whereas in a country market or farmer's market, you get to meet the farmer, you feel like it's a bit more wholesome, and it's also it's a much healthier economy in that sense as well.
Yeah, and as well, you know, like it or not, there is a lot of elitism around the art world, especially when you go into the fine art area. And I don't think that's always necessary. And I think me talking directly to people breaks down those barriers a bit. And I'm more comfortable with that, because I think, look at what we've just gone through, right, with the pandemic. So many people brought creativity back into their lives, like through, even if you're just watching more TV or reading more books, or a lot of people started painting again or dealing with ceramics or whatever, you know, like it's so important to have creativity in our life in whatever medium or facet that comes into you. But for a lot of people, it's just, I'm learning about how an abstract painting has been made by watching this artist, and I find that really escapist, and that helps me, you know, and I love that side of it. And you know, even like really basic stuff, like I put all the pricing on my website, because a lot of people are, when they go into a gallery space, they find it intimidating. A lot of the work isn't priced, and that's not very comfortable, you know. So it's just having that accessibility and visibility and making it sort of easier in a way, and taking the elitism out of it. And like I make good work. I really believe in the work that I make, and why not share it and put it out there, because that's what I want to do, and do it in a way that I'm comfortable with.
Amen.
Amen.
Preach. No, that was fantastic. So I think that's a good note to end on, Ashley. It's really inspiring to hear you follow the path and to be so passionate and committed to it and determined, and the hard work that's involved, but obviously the passion's still very much alive. And I'm sure that people watching and listening to this will get a lot from that. So thanks so much for being part of it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for being my first podcast and inviting me on.
Thanks so much.